The ultimate goal for all creatures in existence, us included, is to survive. In Richard Dawkins' tour de force publication, The Selfish Gene, he aptly describes all living beings as survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. In terms of life history strategies, our survival can be ensured on a relatively short time scale. But this requires getting adequate food and nutrients, avoiding predation, or reducing our susceptibility to disease or parasites. But for our long-term survival, no animal to date has been found completely beyond the jurisdiction of mortality. So our survival must take on a new manifestation, our genes. In order to survive, we must transfer our genetic material onto the next generation. In other words, find a mate, produce offspring, and live on through them. Ideally, we all want to raise our offspring to the highest standard so they can produce viable offspring themselves. This, in the context of evolutionary biology, is known as reaching their peak level of fitness. At this optimum evolutionary fitness, our offspring can pass on their genes, of which you comprise one half of, to the next generation so their progeny can reproduce, and so on. However, in a system where access to and quality of resources like shelter, food, suitable mates are limited, a struggle between individuals ensues. And it was described by Charles Darwin that such a competition for access to these resources resulted in the selection of traits that leads to an increase in their evolutionary fitness, better known as natural selection. He extrapolated further in his other book, The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex, that such selection pressures also have specific applications towards selecting a mate. This is better known as the concept of sexual selection. In 1996, Dr. Robin Baker analysed a collection of Lonely Hearts columns to find out what men and women wanted in an ideal partner. He found that males tended to seek out women with youthful or beautiful qualities. These are telltale signs that they are fertile. Females tended to look out for indicators of good characters, traits such as honesty or fidelity, or indicators of resource such as money and status. These behavioural traits do have their foundations in the fundamental physiology of male and female reproduction. See, females, they produce eggs, which are relatively large and sparingly produced. They require a large investment of energy for both their production and, once fertilized, carrying and supplying her young with nutrients as they develop. In comparison, the energy investment required for sperm production is absolutely minuscule. Not a fucking bother to us. They're much smaller and produce in much vaster quantities than eggs. So a male's reproductive success is limited by the number of females that he can mate with, and a female's success is limited by the number of eggs that she can produce. Therefore, males will mate with anything that looks remotely ready for motherhood, while females will be more reluctant in their choice of males to ensure that their investment in procreation outweighs the costs of just producing eggs. How females make the most prudent choice of mates is by determining their levels of evolutionary fitness, and this is through two types of sexual selection: intersexual selection and intersexual selection. Intrasexual selection involves males directly compete with one another, where the female uses their physical fitness as an indicator of their overall evolutionary fitness. This could be stags during a rut having a simple roaring contest, or elephant seals literally battling it out tooth and nail. The winner of either bout now has access to mating privileges with the female. Intersexual selection is the assessment of a male's fitness based on the quality of his features, which might not always be physical manifestations. This process of selection is prominent in bird species such as peacocks or birds of paradise. This is done where the female, they select the most presentable male. This could be done by the quality of their plumage, the complexity of their birdsong, or their ability to provide adequate food and shelter. But then again, while the ability to provide resources seems like a good reason to choose a mate, why would females select a male just because he's good looking? Same with us. Why would, if we're thinking back to base evolutionary terms, it serves no immediate effect towards her own survival, but this phenomenon can be explained by Hamilton's rule, better known as the sexy sons hypothesis. Genuine name. If a male's high-quality coat or plumage is a physical representation of his genes, and it's a trait that increases his chance of getting a mate, it can be assumed that if the female son has those sexy genes, the chances of him passing his genes on to the next generation are higher, increasing her chance of long-term survival. Is this type of selection found in humans? Well, let's just say intersexual selection is Popeye versus Bluto, while intersexual selection, just think of the lyrics to ZZ Top's Sharp Dressed Men, essentially. So, while the males are out and about, philandering and trying to spread as much of their seed as far as possible, in the midst of all this, each male might struggle to keep track of who his kids are. Assuming that there is an overlap of males selecting one female to mate with, It can even be brought into question whether one of the females that the male is mated with has produced his kids with his genes. To combat this, a suite of practices has been employed to ensure a male's paternity. The first one, and the most extreme one, is to kill all the female's kids. Yes, infanticide is practiced by lions, bears, and bottlenose dolphins in some very rare cases. Basically, this is done to remove any genetic competition and ensure that the male's genes and his genes only propagate. In lions, for example, when a new male takes over the pride and eventually kills all the babas, the female is induced back into a fertile state so the male can mate with her. However, say in female bonobos or chimpanzees, they manage to avoid infanticide by soliciting matings with all available males in the social group. This means that no male is sure of not being the father of her offspring, so they don't risk killing their own kids. In species where multiple males can mate with one female and sexual competition can still occur within a reproductive system, the idea of sperm competition comes into play. Both male dragonflies and dunnock birds have been observed to literally clean out sperm packets deposited by previous suitors before mating with them. Just to be sure. Also, it has even been hypothesized in honeybees that when within the queen's womb, the sperm of one male can physically incapacitate or kill off another male sperm in an attempt just to fertilize the queen. And the final method of ensuring your paternity is by mate guarding, which has the most diverse range of methods. In both heliconius butterflies and red-sided garter snakes, the male sprays a pheromone onto the female after mating with her to act as an anti-aphrodisiac, deterring any other males from mating with her. Sex panther, it's essentially Sex Panther. In many invertebrate species, such as the thorny-headed worm, the male has a mating plug, and he plugs it into the female after mating with her to prevent any other sperm from entering. And in some cases, they stick the plugs in competing males as well. But the most impressive, I gotta say, the two most impressive species with mate guarding is a beetle known as the flower bug, and by humans. What the flower bug does, I said this guy, what he doesn't just insert his sperm into the female, he inserts his sperm into all other males in the vicinity. So no matter who the other males have sex with, he's definitely going to have his kids. But then, humans, you say? Surely they don't carry out such primitive or extreme rituals, you say? Oh no. Their approach is much more cognitive and cunning. Man ensures his legacy is maintained through the social construct that is marriage. It has been argued that this highly complex form of mate guarding employs the vigilance efforts of society to ensure that either the male or the female remains faithful to their partner and produces their child, and this is done by the stigmatizing and shaming of them if they break such bonds of holy matrimony.